From the second book of Samuel. David's army took the field against Israel, and a battle was fought in the forest near Mahanaim. The forces of Israel were defeated by David's servants, and the casualties that day were heavy, 20,000 men. The battle spread out over the entire region, and the thickets consumed more combatants that day than did the sword. Absalom unexpectedly came up against David's servants. He was mounted on a mule, and as the mule passed under the branches of a large terebinth, his hair caught fast in the tree. He hung between heaven and earth, while the mule he had been riding ran off. Someone saw this and reported to Joab that he had seen Absalom hanging from a terebinth. Joab said to his informant, "If you saw him, why did you not strike him to the ground on the spot? Then it would have been my duty to give you 50 pieces of silver and a belt." But the man replied to Joab, "Even if I already had 1,000 pieces of silver in my two hands, I would not harm the king's son. For the king charged you and Abishai and Ittai in our hearing to protect the youth Absalom for his sake. Had I been disloyal and killed him, the whole matter would have come to the attention of the king, and you would stand aloof." Joab replied, "I will not waste time with you in this way." And taking 3 pikes in hand, he thrust for the heart of Absalom, still hanging from the tree alive. Next, 10 of Joab's young armor-bearers closed in on Absalom and killed him with further blows. Joab then sounded the horn, and the soldiers turned back from the pursuit of the Israelites because Joab called to them to halt. Absalom was taken up and cast into a deep pit in the forest, and a very large mound of stones was erected over him. And all the Israelites fled to their own tents. Now David was sitting between the 2 gates, and a lookout mounted to the roof of the gate above the city wall, where he looked about and saw a man running all alone. The lookout shouted to inform the king, who said, "If he is alone, he has good news to report." As he kept coming nearer, the lookout spied another runner. From his place atop the gate, he cried out, "There is another man running by himself." And the king responded, "He too is bringing good news." Then the lookout said, "I notice that the first one runs like Ahimaaz, son of Zadok." The king replied, "He is a good man. He comes with good news." Then Ahimaaz called out and greeted the king. With face to the ground, he paid homage to the king and said, "Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered up the man who rebelled against my lord the king." But the king asked, "Is the youth Absalom safe?" And Ahimaaz replied, "I saw a great disturbance when the king's servant Joab sent your servant on, but I do not know what it was." Then the king said, "Step aside and remain in attendance here." So he stepped aside and remained there. When the Cushite came in, he said, "Let my lord the king receive the good news that this day the Lord has taken your part, freeing you from the grasp of all who rebelled against you." But the king asked the Cushite, "Is young Absalom safe?" The Cushite replied, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rebel against you with evil intent be as that young man." The king was shaken and went to the room over the city gate to weep. He said as he wept, "My son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you, Absalom, my son, my son." Joab told that the king was weeping and mourning for Absalom, and that day's victory was turned into mourning for the whole army when they heard about that the king was grieving for his son. The soldiers stole into the city that day like men shamed by flight in battle. Meanwhile, the king covered his face and cried out in a loud voice, "My son Absalom, Absalom, my son, my son."